Tell them I work in the library too. 30% off. Or 30% off.
Oh my goodness.
I do work in the library.
So thank you all for joining KSU's Franchise Management Speaker Series. It's Management 4124 here at the campus of KSU. The speaker series includes CEOs, private equity firms, leaders, bankers, entrepreneurs, and advisors. We're in a classroom on the KSU campus where the cameras, unfortunately, and you'll see this, it'll look like I'm looking down, they only face front, so you only see me, which is unfortunate, and in the top of the ceiling. So while it may look like I'm looking down and all by myself, that's not really the case, although I wish perhaps my students who took their midterm tonight may have preferred that. My name is Jordan Krolick, Professor of Franchise Management. My non-professor life is as an independent equity sponsor, acquiring businesses, a consultant, and a senior leader with companies such as McDonald's, Arby's, Home Depot, and more. Today, we are extremely excited to have John Hamburger, the founder and president of Franchise Times Corp., a national publisher of business trade journals in franchising and finance. And if I might add to this, probably the publisher of business journals in franchising and finance. The company publishes Franchise Times Magazine, the National Franchise Industry Trade Journal, the Restaurant Finance Monitor, the thing that I got introduced to very early in my career, monthly financial restaurant newsletter, food on demand news, and food service news and online website. He also produces a number of industry executive events, including the Restaurant Finance and Development Conference, which to me is just about the top event in the industry, and the Food on Demand Conference. He has over 40 years of experience in franchising and finance and is in the inner circle of the most respected, quoted, and revered people in the industry. Thank you for joining us, John. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Jordan, for having me. Welcome, students. Glad to be here.
No, I appreciate it. And you're calling from Minnesota, if I remember right?
I am. That's my home.
Perfect. Hopefully the weather is entering its month of summer soon.
It's always beautiful up here.
So let me kick off and really just want to talk to you because you are always the interviewer. So it's great that you're the interviewee here and I really appreciate it. But I'd love to know a little bit about your personal background, if we could just start there.
Sure. Well, Jordan, I went to college in Minnesota. I was an accounting major and I worked for a CPA firm for a couple of years, Arthur Andersen, which doesn't exist anymore. And then I went to work for a franchisee, a restaurant franchisee. There was a restaurant concept back in the 80s. It's kind of a hot concept. I doubt any of your students will have heard of it or I know they wouldn't remember it. I doubt they've heard of it. It was called Chi-Chi's Mexican Restaurants. And it was a dinner house Mexican restaurant chain that was kind of a hot concept back in the 80s. And I worked for a franchisee. We built, we had as many as 38 locations. And in the late 80s, late 87, 88, 89, I decided I wanted to go into business for myself. I was tired of being an accountant. And so I started in 89, I did some consulting, 87, 88, 89. I started a newsletter called Restaurant Finance Monitor, and I started the Restaurant Finance and Development Conference back in 1990. And I ran that, still doing some consulting on the franchise finance side. And I ran that for a number of years, and I ended up buying a magazine called Franchise Times. And it had been published in Chicago beginning in the early 90s, and they ceased publishing it. So I bought the trademark and all the back issues and all the lists and put my own little publishing team together. And our first episode, or our first issue of Franchise Times was published in the late 90s. So that's sort of a snapshot. I started in accounting, moved out of accounting, and got into consulting, and then I have morphed into the publishing world. So that's my story.
There's this nice, stable job, I'm assuming, and you say, because I got a lot of kids here who are deciding what is that next stage. Unfortunately, I've got a lot of seniors in this class. And he said, hey, you know what? Forget security. Let me go do my own thing. In fact, not let me just do my own thing. I'm actually going to spend some money and buy something. Tell us some of the thoughts about that.
Yeah, well, I think I was fortunate that I did work for a company. I worked for a very strict, wear a suit and tie to work every day accounting firm for 3 years. So I sort of learned how to report to people. And then the franchisee of Chi-Chi's was very entrepreneurial. So I kind of had the best of both worlds there. I was in an organization, but it was an entrepreneurial organization. So we were out there making deals, buying restaurants, financing. We actually took the company public. We were a small public company back. I'm sure your students have heard of SPACs. Well, we actually merged with what you might call a SPAC back in the in the early 80s. And so anyways, I got exposed to a lot of different interesting things, finance and whatever, but I always wanted to run my own show, do my own thing. My father was a small businessman, and I started actually working for him when I was in grade school. He was a printer, and he used to drag my brother and I down there on weekends, and we would move paper around and collate and do all the things. So I got used to working, and I liked working for myself, and really enjoyed being on my own. And talk about risk. I left this employment of the company when my wife was pregnant with our first child.
Okay.
So it panned out, but it's that's why they call it risk.
But so you're sitting there, let's take one step back. So it sounds like your father was a very positive influence in your life. What was his thoughts? I mean, if he's a printer, why, that's a big portion, I'm assuming, of Maxine Publishing, especially back in 1989. What were his thoughts on that? Was it supportive?
Well, printing is, he was a commercial printer, so he printed what people brought to them. I think it made it easier for me to start our newsletter because I had access to a graphic artist. I had access to a printer to be able to print it. And, this was pre-digital, Jordan. So, we stuffed them into envelopes and put stamps on them and mailed them. Just, that's how they did it back then. But being around my father and watching the printing business was definitely a help as I got into this. So
we're sitting here in the early 1990s. You bought a company. You have a small team, it sounds like, based on what you just shared. Where did you go from there? Yeah, well, Franchise Times, you remember now we're relaunching it again. So we're sort of known as, that was the publication that came and went. But we had to convince people that we were sticking with it. I think we put a good team together. Our publisher, Mary Jo Larson, is a very personable person. We went to a lot of franchise shows. We talked to a lot of franchisors, franchisees, and we tried to make the publication relevant, where people would enjoy reading it. We like to call Franchise Times, I call it's People Magazine in the front, and it's all of the details in the back. We like to tell the story of people in franchising. A lot of them have really interesting backgrounds. I mean, just today I was on a call with a young entrepreneur who was starting a franchise, and it's just exciting. I mean, I think it's fun talking to entrepreneurs. They're so full of excitement with their ideas, and we just really enjoyed what we do, and telling the stories of these entrepreneurs, and that's really what franchising is all about, and it's a lot of fun. And so we'll keep going down this progression, but I always like to skip when I hear good nuggets. So you're talking to this franchisee today, or franchisor, a Persian franchisor. When you talk to them, what is, if they ask for your advice, what's the one or two things that you want to share that you feel like really gets them on the, to see things the way that they should be seen, or gets them on the path or the road as they continue during their progression of hopefully achieving success.
Yeah, well, Jordan, you'll appreciate this, but what I always tell franchisors is make sure the franchisees can make some money. And when the franchisees make money, you've got a great system. And 20 years ago, somebody asked me, what was the best franchise I had seen? What's the best franchise out there? Everybody always asks me that question. And I said, Taco Bell. And they said, Taco Bell, why Taco Bell? I said, well, the franchisees all make really good money. And when the franchisees make money, you've got a really good system. When the franchisor tries to take more than their fair share, you've got a recipe for problems. And so I told this young franchisor, I said, make sure your franchisees make a lot of money. And you can make a lot of money, but you'll make a lot more money if they make money. And that's the advice I usually give every young franchisor. Franchisors have ideas, they've created something, and now they want to expand it around the country. And sometimes they lose sight of how this world of franchising really works. So that's my advice.
And when you say they lose sight of it, dive into that for a second.
Well, I think as a franchisor, you not only have that business, where you have customers and you're trying to satisfy customers in that particular business, but when you start franchising, your franchisees now are your customers. And so you're running almost like a completely separate business, trying to provide the products and services that your franchisees need to sell to make money. And so it's like running two different businesses. And some people are equipped to do it, others are not. And I think good franchisors realize that and are good at it. They bring the right kind of people in. I think sometimes young franchisors, I've seen this happen before, where there's a sense that maybe there's a quick buck in franchising. I was at an IFA convention, International Franchise Association convention, 10 years ago, and I met a guy. He was a fireman who had started a macaroni and cheese concept in the boroughs around New York, the New York area. And he had 3 of them and he wanted to franchise. And so I asked him a little bit about his business and what kind of sales he was doing, what kind of profits he was doing. And I said to him, I said, you know something, I don't think you should franchise. And the reason being is I think you're going to have to build a couple locations outside of the New York area and see if this works, see if you can make more money, because I don't think your franchisees are going to make any money. And he said to me, he goes, you're the only person at this convention who told me not to franchise. And as you know, from going to these, the International Franchise Convention, everybody wants you to franchise because the lawyers want you to franchise because there's money in it for them. The franchise sales groups want you to franchise because there's money in it for them. And I looked at this poor young franchisor, this guy with this mac and cheese concept, and I could just imagine all the problems this guy was going to have once he started selling franchises, because the units themselves were not making enough money but he had somebody told him, hey, why don't you franchise? And hopefully I talked him out of it.
Hey, you know what? There's nothing. If I could tell you, and you know this, how many times people want to think that franchising is a get rich quick. It just means those 3 words, and it's just not the case. I mean, of course, we talk in this class about concepts like McDonald's and Chick-fil-A, given that we're in Atlanta here, come up, and they have they're getting 15 to 25% of every top line dollar. The way, whether it's real estate or whether it's the Chick-fil-A model, but it works because the restaurants do $3.5 to $5 million. That program doesn't work if you have $1 million business, and that's what you're selling. It's a business relationship, and it is very, very difficult for young franchisors or people who are thinking about franchising to understand that you're sharing the profit. There's only so much cash you're making, you're sharing the profit. So understanding that, so now we're in the mid 90s, and I didn't go to my first RFDC to right around, I think 2000, maybe 2001, and was totally blown away. But let's take a little digression into RFDC, the conference, and that type of thing. Because you said you started it about 10 years earlier, but now it's this behemoth, thousands and thousands of people coming. But I know when I went to my first one in 01, it was a gathering. It was just great because I made so many great relationships, but it was a gathering. Now it's a small city. Share with us how you got from the gathering to the city.
Yeah, well, the one of the things that, if I go back to starting it, why did I start the conference? Well, restaurants, it was very difficult for restaurants to get financing back in the late 80s and early 90s. Restaurants were perceived by banks as atom bombs. They didn't want to go near them. And I had experienced that in this Chi-Chi's Mexican restaurant business in the 80s. It was very difficult to find financing. And so I thought at the time this would be a way to help restaurant owners, restaurant franchisees get financing. And so the early days of the conference, that's really what it was all about, teaching restaurant owners and restaurant franchisees how to go about finding financing for their equipment and for their real estate. And what really happened, Jordan, is that beginning around the mid to late 90s, more and more financial institutions around the country realized that they could make money loaning money to chain restaurants. And what they found was that they could charge a higher premium, a higher spread on their cost of funds to restaurants, because the perception was restaurants are difficult to finance. Franchisees, restaurant owners, they will take what they can get. And so there was this sense, which was true. And so restaurant lenders came into the space, they were able to charge a premium and build a pretty good book of business with low defaults. And so you saw in the late 90s, you saw a number of finance companies, a number of banks come into restaurant lending. The biggest that became the biggest was GE Capital, came in and started developing a pretty significant lending practice. The other thing was on the real estate side. Real estate owners realized that owning restaurant real estate was a pretty profitable investment. And so you saw a number of different institutions, real estate investment trusts that got into lending or got into developing restaurants, and there's a couple of them around today. National Retail Properties, Store Capital, the former FFCA, Franchise Finance Corporation of America. They realized they could make money leasing restaurant properties. So that all came together. So by the time you came to the conference, Jordan, in 2001, we're just right in the middle of that. We're right in the thick of that, where more and more institutions, more and more lenders were coming into the space and wanted a piece of the restaurant business. So as much as I would like to go back and say, hey, I was a genius for coming up with this idea 32 years ago, I was helped immensely by the way the capital markets decided to fund restaurants. They liked restaurants. And they've got low defaults. I mean, if you go back into the financial crisis in 08, a lot of the lenders did very well coming out of that. And just recently in the pandemic, there were not a lot of defaults in the chain restaurant business. So I'll take credit, but I think I was helped along by what happened in the markets.
That's very magnanimous for you to say that. And success is a post-rationalization of what actually ever happens. It's Harvard Business Review likes to say that you started here and you ended up here, but you really started here and a lot of this, and then suddenly you end up here. And that's terrific. So given that, bringing it up to today, we've just had COVID. I mean, COVID, it'd be interesting to hear on the print industry. It would be interesting to hear on the conference industry. It would be interesting to hear on your thoughts on the franchise and restaurant and hospitality industries themselves. What do you think the new is going to be? And what do you think that, if any of it was driven by what we've had to deal with the last few years?
Yeah, well, let me talk about the restaurant industry, because that's the area that I follow closely. And the restaurant industry, we had a publication, we still do, a digital publication called Food on Demand. It covers the delivery space, it covers the drive-through, it covers robotics, it covers all the digital technology that's gone into restaurants. And we started that about 5 years ago. We started to see more and more interest from restaurants in delivery, third-party delivery, and more convenient ways to get food to customers. And it was really starting to take hold, and there were a lot of companies that were interested in it. In fact, you mentioned Chick-fil-A. Well, Chick-fil-A was at a conference of ours 4 or 5 years ago, studying the whole delivery space, the how to do delivery, how to handle drive-through. They were at the conference 4 or 5 years ago. Well, now COVID comes along, pandemic comes along, and it forced restaurants to deliver food, to get food to their customers, not having them come into the drive-through, either through the drive-through, through delivery, through carry out. Chipotle's got what they call a Chipotle lane, where you order ahead, you show up and you walk up to the window and pick up your food. This just got accelerated during COVID, and this is one area that I think is going to continue. People want food delivered, they want it convenient, they want it how they want it. I think you're going to see in the next, I don't know, probably within the next 5 years, I think you'll see drone delivery of food become just a commonplace occurrence. You'll have automatic driving cars delivering food. You'll have pizza vans that are cooking food inside the pizza van and delivering it. I mean, there is so much going on right now in the robotic space, and all the technology, the food technology that's going to change the restaurant business over the next, really over the next 3 to 5 years. I think you're going to end up, now this is my own opinion, I think you'll have 2 types of restaurants. You'll have restaurants that operate with the utmost technology. They'll be run by fewer employees, but you'll have robots cooking food. You'll have robots putting condiments on the food. And you'll have some experienced machine operators that, I was telling somebody the other day, think of Homer Simpson at the nuclear power plant. You're going to have people running machines that are going to be delivering food. And so that's the one side. You're going to have that quick serve. It'll be probably quick serve, fast casual, which is going to be machine and automated. And then you're going to have the sit down like we have today, where it's high touch, high service, but you're going to end up having to pay for that. I think that's going to be an expensive type of outing for people. So that, Jordan, I go back, this pandemic just accelerated the technology in the restaurant space, and it's continuing today. I mean, there's more dollars going into technology to help restaurants become more efficient. Now, how it impacted us is our business was primarily print. We printed everything that we did, but today the only thing that we print, and we do offer it online, is Franchise Times. We still have a print publication, Franchise Times, but we do so much more in digital. And our digital revenue now for the second straight year exceeds our print revenue.
Oh, wow.
So there's been a real change there. As far as our events go, in 2020, we were not able to hold live events. We had to cancel our food on demand conference. We had to cancel our restaurant finance and development conference. We ran them digitally, and we had a good time doing that. We learned a lot about that. But I think the future, I think people are still going to want to get together and have private meetings. I think in our restaurant finance space, I think lenders, by and large, like to meet with their customers before they write them a big check. And so I think we'll be okay there. Food on demand conference, we've got one coming up in May in Las Vegas, and we're expecting a record crowd at that one. So the events, I think, came through very well. The publishing business, if you didn't have a digital offering, you were in trouble. Fortunately, we did.
No, that makes perfect sense. I mean, again, there's nothing that can be replaced for the personal connection, because the Zoom meeting, even ours today, you started at 0, you're done at 60, and there's not that connection that you get through Zoom or through online. You are trading that for convenience, though. It's incredibly convenient not to have to get on a plane and get a rental car and so on and so forth. So when you look today at being more of a digital publication and a digital powerhouse, what does that do to the culture and the values of your company?
Well, I think that I don't think it really changes the culture or the values. I mean, if you start out with the premise of we are going to provide high quality information to people, and I think you can deliver that. I think you can deliver that through print, or you can deliver it through digital the same. Really comes down to, the type of information you produce, how you want to be perceived out there by your audience. And I think that we've always felt that we want to be held in the highest regard. We want to have our people be able to look themselves in the mirror and say that they were independent, they were able to write something that was honest, that they weren't shilling for an advertiser. And I think we can do that. We can do that in print, and we can do it equally as well in digital. I think the one thing that's interesting about digital is, and you see this with all different types of publishers, where a lot of advertising is sold based on the click. When you read an article, you click, you see a link someplace, you click it, and there'll be an ad server that serves up 4 or 5 ads. And so there's a lot of pressure, I think, on publishers to produce titles, headlines, and stories that generate clicks. And we even take a look at that. We look at how we title articles. But at the end of the day, you have to be accurate and proud of what you've written, and I'll give you an example. First of all, in a business publication, we do not get the clicks that the New York Post gets, right? Or the Drudge Report, or some of the Huffington Report. So we don't have the same kind of pressure, I think, that those organizations have. And again, it's about, and in the long run, it's about your integrity. And I don't want to throw that away with some sort of bogus article promoting some franchise that doesn't warrant being promoted.
Sure. I have a question for my class. Jake?
Hey, John, my name is Jake Jones. I just had maybe two little questions. The first one is kind of relating back to what you said. Why aren't machines being automated to run restaurants right now? And do you think it's because the people will have a drawback to the machine opposed to the face-to-face cooking method? And the second one is, and I kind of related that to, you had the 2020 virtual conference and you said it probably wasn't as appealing as the in-person conferences because people didn't have that physical connection. And how important is it for big franchises to have a personal connection even to every franchisee? Like, let's say a McDonald's, is it important for that top man to have a connection to the small man in an instance?
Yeah, well, those are really good questions. And the first one I'll take a stab at, and that's the question with about machinery in the restaurant space. And I will tell you that I think probably the biggest reason why the restaurant industry is late to the game when it comes to we'll call it machine automation is that restaurant labor was cheap. And let's take a look where automation has been successful. And one particular area has been the automotive business. And if we were to go visit a car manufacturing or a car assembly plant today, you would see widespread use of robotics automation. But the restaurant business had extremely cheap labor, and the minimum wage was very low for a long time. I mean, the federal minimum wage is still very low, although I doubt anybody is still making the federal minimum wage. But because of that, I think restaurants, just didn't have an incentive to look at any incentive to automating their restaurants. So I think that was probably the number one reason. I think it's coming. I think that restaurant owners today, when they look out at the wage scale and how it's changed so quickly, I think that there's a lot more interest in employing technology than there's ever been in the past. And so I see a lot more investment in robotics. I think drone technology is really interesting for delivery because one of the biggest complaints restaurants have today is the cost of delivery, having to pay Grubhub and pay DoorDash and Uber, having to pay their fees. And I think anything that can bring down the cost of delivery, and I think drones will be something you'll see in the future. I think that has the opportunity to bring those costs down. I think you'll see restaurant chains all over that. The second question had to do with our conference that was virtual versus live, and the question, if I remember it, was is the personal connection still important? And I think that in small transactions, you're buying Gillette razor blades on Amazon, you're buying some clothes that you can easily return. I don't know that the personal connection is that important, but I think when you're lending money, large sums of money to business owners, I think when you're a franchisee and you're going to write a big check, you're a potential franchisee and you're going to write a big check to buy a franchise, I still think it's important to have some kind of a one-on-one relationship, a meeting of some sorts. So I think there'll be some events, if you were in the conference business, I think I think people who go to conferences will take a look at those and quickly decide that one's not for me. I don't need that one. I can do that on Zoom. I think it's very easy to convey thoughts, ideas, educational ideas. I mean, I'm sitting here, 1,000 miles away from all of you, and we're on a Zoom call, and we're able to communicate. But I'm not sure that I could decide over the phone that I'm going to loan you $1 million so you can go out and open a franchise. I think I might want to meet you first. So.
I love that argument that, because I hadn't thought about that, and I will steal it shamelessly as I do from much of your publications. That in all reality, the size of the transaction is at least a significant factor. It may not be the overriding factor in the determinants of having more of a personal relationship in the sales cycle. I think that's very interesting. And one other thing that I probably stole shamelessly from you years ago or somebody else is that Domino's was termed a technology company that sold pizza. I'm not sure that's where they are today or not. But as you talk about the technology and the robotics, before we let that topic go, who is best positioned? Who do you look out there and you say they are getting it?
Yeah, well, I would I would say that what we call fast food, we call it QSR restaurants in our little industry, but the fast food industry has been probably working the fastest towards an automated future, a technological future. The casual dining space, the full service dining space, I think it's going to be harder. It's tougher for them because that space is all about servers waiting on customers, and I'm not sure that's something that can be outsourced to a machine or to a robot. That personal touch. And that's why I said earlier, I think that's going to survive, but I think it's going to be, it'll be an expensive night out because of the high cost of labor. Who's good at it? Well, Domino's today has more people in their IT department than they have in their operations. I mean, to them, it's all about technology. And I think if you were to go peek behind the office at Chick-fil-A or McDonald's, Jordan mentioned, you would see a large number of technology people as well. In fact, sometime if you just want to, just for the heck of it, go to Indeed.com and plug in a restaurant company and see what they're hiring. It's kind of fun to see. And you can see all kinds of technology people, engineers, that they're hiring because that's going to be their future.
That's very clever. Avery?
Hey, so I have two questions for you. So the first, oh, sorry. My name's Avery Green. Thank you for coming virtually. But my first question is, I know you mentioned that automation and technology is going to be huge in the restaurant industry. Are you talking more the front of the house or the back of the house?
Yeah. Well, I think, let's talk about the back of the house. I think more of the automation will be in the back of the house, in the food preparation area. Give you an example. In Toronto, there is a device that has been built that can make a Thai dish, a number of different types of Thai dishes that's made by machine, and it's very interesting. It takes one person really to load it, to make sure and to clean it every couple of days, but and it can be accessed by a customer just with a uh, they can order it on their phone. They can come up to the machine and order it, slip the credit card in, or use their phone. So I think a lot of this is going to be back of the house, but the front of the house, if you think about it, a lot of it is being changed today. And we think of restaurants 10, 15 years ago, they had expensive point of sale equipment in the restaurant. And I know, Avery, you and your fellow students there are ordering food regularly on your phone and you're picking it up. Nobody's keying that into a point of sale system. And just by virtue of you ordering it on your phone, you're saving restaurants hundreds of dollars in weekly labor that they don't have to staff a cashier, someone to take your order and to make change for you. You've ordered it with your phone. So there's more and more of that coming. And but I think restaurants with automation are focused on the back of the house. I think with other forms of technology on the ordering side. And then the other thing that's really changed, and there's a lot of money going into this, is how to market to you through loyalty, through marketing to the different social media channels that you go to. And this has been a huge area. And I think restaurant chains, for years, everyone sort of came up through the restaurant business. And you were a restaurant operator, you got into the marketing department. Well, now the marketers in the restaurants are hiring people from the consumer packaged goods business, a lot of people coming from outside the industry and bringing new ideas into it. So it's really kind of an exciting time, for change. And you said you had a second question, Avery. I thought I answered the first.
So my next question is, in some restaurants where you may not have as many people in the back and you're using the automation, are those jobs going to become more skilled than they currently are? Or do you think they're going to stay similarly leveled? You just have to load the machine, or you have to be able to technologically fix it, or if there's any issues and stuff along those lines?
Well, I think they're going to be higher skilled. They're going to need more skills, and I think they're going to pay more, and they're going to need to pay more. And so I think that I wrote an article kind of tongue in cheek about this, but I think you're going to have somebody that's really going to be skilled in the technology that'll be in the restaurant. I think you'll have somebody who's really skilled at operating the machines. And then I think you'll have probably a junior level person that will be sort of handling the inventory, handling the loading of the machines. But I think you're going to have probably more higher skilled employees there than you would say you'd currently have right now.
Thank you.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And before I leave it, I'd love to know your thoughts on, one of the things that I've seen changing, because, even when we were at McDonald's, we were using legal pads and tick marks and sitting in restaurants trying to figure it out. And now what I'm just passionate about is the influx of analytics into restaurants. How do you think that has changed how you see the industry? Or maybe you don't think it has, but how do you think what do you think the impact of now having credit card and detailed analytics on customers, where even 10 years ago, we didn't have any of that?
Sure. Well, Jordan, I can remember listening to the president of Arby's 25 years ago when someone asked him, where did he locate a restaurant? He said, my site selection is very easy. I find out where the McDonald's is and I try to find a site next to McDonald's. Okay. But you think today, you think of the data, you think of data that's out there. And, and especially with the way digital orders are coming in, where are those digital orders coming from? There's so many more factors that go into where do I locate a restaurant? Where's the foot traffic? There's technology available today that basically can tell you, where does your traffic come from? Right now, if you were working in the drive-through lane at a restaurant, you don't really know where they're coming from. But there's technology available to tell you where they're coming from. There's technology available to tell you where they're coming from to your competitor. And so you can use all this data to make really good site selection. You can also use the analytics, and they do, from their loyalty. I saw the other day Wingstop has, I think it's like 25 million people. They've got a database of like 25 million people. And you think of the data that's in a Domino's, into their app, and the data that's available there, and what they can do to craft offers to get you off your couch to go grab your phone and order pizza. There's just so much more than there used to be. I hate to keep going back to the way things used to be because it makes us look so damn old.
I have a full head of hair, you just can't see it.
Restaurants used to market, it was about television. They buy 40, if you could get on a local television station at the evening news, 40 weeks, you had it made. And I think television is an afterthought, unless it's national or it's tied in cable to some big event. It's one-on-one marketing. That's the most important thing. And that's a huge change. And so analytics are really key to running these restaurants these days.
And you taught me something, John, because when we were revitalizing Arby's, I didn't understand why we had so many stores on the breakfast side of the street. And we didn't even serve breakfast. Hey, Jada, good question.
Yeah. Okay. I was trying to remember because it was so long ago. Hi, my name is Jada. Thank you for being here with us today. My question was it was kind of tagging on Avery's question, how he said there was the front of the house and what if technology was going to be the front and the back of the house. So in the future, when that happens, how many operational positions in the company will be left, and who are they?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. I can only speculate because we're not there yet. But I think that if let's just use the example that all the orders are placed in advance by your phone. Let's assume that when your car comes into the drive-through of any particular restaurant, there's a license plate reader or there's some sort of a geofencing that notifies our machines that you're back again, and 9 times out of 10 you generally order this particular item. So you're in the drive-through. So the orders are coming in through your phone. The geofencing and the license plate reader is collecting the data that you're pulling in. So we're probably going to have one person in the restaurant that's the sort of the technology expert, the expediter, who makes sure these orders come in, get out. I think you're going to have somebody in the back of the house that's going to run these machines, very skilled, be able to fix the machines. And then I think you probably have 1 or 2 other employees that, I think the person handing the food out the window is even going to be a machine at some point. That you don't need to have somebody take your money, take your cash, because it's all going to be digital. And just like a cash machine hands you cash, there'll be a machine that's going to hand you your food. And so I can see these restaurants doing, as Jordan said, 4 or 5 million, $6 million a year, and you'll be able to run them with maybe 4 or 5 employees. That's, I think, that's going to be the future. I think they'll be higher paid. Like I said, they'll be higher paid people. I think that I think it'll be similar to machine operators, skilled machine operators.
Ethan?
Hey, John, my name's Ethan. I've got a question for you because I'll be graduating later this year in December, and I know a couple other students in here are also graduating either this semester or next. So if you had to give us one piece of advice as we graduate from college and get into the real world, what would that advice be from you?
Wow, that's a tough question. And if you were going to pursue something in the restaurant space, I would have one real quick for you. I guess I would say this, and you sound like you're a man of enthusiasm, and you have a lot of passion, just by your voice and your question. I think the world is so much different today than when I got out of college. When I got out of college, I needed a job, and my parents were not wealthy. I had a lot of college debt to pay. And I came out of college in the late 70s when the economy was really terrible. And so getting a job was extremely important to me. I needed to work. But the one thing I would say today, because there's so much opportunity out there, I believe, is whatever you do, whatever you get into, make sure you have the passion for it, that you really like it. And it's going to make your life so much more fun if you can get up in the morning, if you have to go to work, and you're not just working at home, but if you have to get up and travel or go to work, even if you're working at home, make sure you're passionate about it, that you really like it. Because there's so many, for those of us who are consigned to work the rest of our lives because we didn't inherit a big fortune, make sure you're really passionate about what you're doing, that you really enjoy it. It'll just make your life so much more fun if you like what you do. And I also think you'll be much more successful if you do something that you like to do. And I define success as being happy, having a happy life. We don't all have to be Elon Musk or Warren Buffett and be billionaires. We can enjoy life and have a great life, find fulfillment in our jobs if we like it and we're passionate about it. So that's my advice to you, Ethan.
That's perfect. Thank you, John.
Who's nominated?
Yeah, so I have one more question. It's Avery again. So I know I currently work at Home Depot in the stores, and with our self-checkout, I get multiple times a day, oh, I'm not going to use that. I'm going to go to a real cashier. I don't want to take people's jobs. Do you think that's going to be a obstacle for the technology advancements, that we're only going to go to, quote, people ran restaurants instead of machine ran restaurants?
I would just ask you this question. What's the age breakdown of the people that want to get in the line with someone versus the not using the self-checkout?
I would say it's definitely probably 60 years or older.
Yeah.
We're very openly anti-technology, conspiracy theory people.
We don't have many of those in Georgia, so it's very, very few.
Well, I was in a McDonald's, that had the order kiosks, and I was in Florida, and it was just funny because the old people were all standing in line, at the counter, and didn't want to use the kiosk. But I think more and more, I mean, I look back to, we used to, you kids you're too young, but we used to drive our cars into the gas station, and a service attendant would come out and put gas in our car and clean our windshield, and we'd drive off. And that doesn't happen much anymore. There's a few stations where they do that, but not too many. And I think more and more at grocery stores, at Walmarts, at Targets, you're just seeing more and more self-checkout. And technology for older folks is difficult, still difficult for some. And but I think your generation, it'll be a snap, and it'll eventually those customers will, more and more customers will want to get in the self-checkout than stand in line for the clerk.
And echoing your earlier comment, I mean, COVID has, if you would have said people 40 and above would be downloading apps and ordering food from their app, 5 years ago, there's no way. But with COVID, you had no other choice. We have time for about one or two more questions. Chris?
Hi, John. My name is Chris. This is a question that's more like general of the restaurant franchise industry, not so much just the technology, but what's the most important thing you see that makes a franchise attractive? Whether that's like the business model or some of their financials or something that's more intangible.
Yeah, well, let's talk financially, Chris, first. The first thing that I look at is what's their profit margin after everything's paid, after the rent's paid, the royalties paid. What's that? So let's just say I have a restaurant concept that does 2 million in sales. What's my restaurant operating margin there? Is it after royalty? Is it 5%, 10%, 15%, 20%? If I were looking to get into a restaurant franchise, that's what I would hone in on and make sure that that's high. And I would say after royalty, high would be something above 15%. That's pretty good. If you're getting down into the under 10%, 5%, that's getting a little bit too tight for my comfort. So that'd be one thing that I would take a look at. And the second thing I'd look at is what's the investment? What's the size of the investment? And so let's take an example. Let's just say that for us to go out and build a new restaurant, we'll say a food restaurant. We'll say it's this $2 million restaurant is a corner location in a strip center, and it costs us $750,000 to build it out. Okay, so I write a check for $750,000, or I borrow it, however I do it. I've got $750 invested. What's my return? So if I'm only going to earn 5% on 2 million, that's 100,000. If I'm going to earn 20% on 2 million, that's 400,000. So what I would do then is I would take that cash investment that I've got, that 750,000, and I would divide it by my return. What kind of cash am I going to generate? And that's, for those of you who have accounting, have taken accounting, that's called a payback. So I would look at what's my payback. How quickly can I get paid back? The big one at 20%, that's 750 divided by 400. I'm paid back in less than 2 years. So that, I like that one. And so my rule of thumb has always been kind of less than a 3-year payback. I might consider that deal. That other one, the 750,000 divided by the 100,000, that payback is 7.5 years. That's too long. That's a lot of risk. So that's how I would look at it.
Thanks, John.
That's terrific. Hey, John, just as advertised, you're terrific tonight. Can't thank you enough. The wisdom, the influence, and frankly, just the nuts and bolts understanding of this space, both franchising and the hospitality and restaurant space is a gift to the class. It's a gift to me. So I really appreciate you joining us. And I thank you for spending a little bit of your night with us. So thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jordan, and to the students, thank you and best of luck to you.
Thank you.
Be well.
Bye-bye.